And I'm going to share my screen next. We have a PowerPoint that we're going to go through. We're just going to talk about IEGs in general. And then we're going to hear from Brittany. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the timeline, the application requirements. We're going to walk through how to use sites. And then we'll have some time for a Q&A. All righty. So an international experience grant provides partial funding toward an international project. And the project that's really key because we specifically left this broad because it could be a credit bearing activity. It could be directed research. It could be funding for an internship in which you're not also using praxis funding. It could be, any variety of things. So project is really broadly defined, and it's up to you to define what your project might look like. IEGs are available during the interterm that just passed, and we'll hear from Brittany, who was one of the recipients of an IEG for the interterm, and then also summer. And the intent is to help students deepen their academic engagement. You're also expected to apply for some additional funding, and we have some of those resources available to you also in this presentation, and or to plan to bear a portion of the cost themselves, right? And then you need to be flexible. Because it's COVID-19, things are changing quickly, and for summer 2022, we may consider virtual options. Our preference would be for students to explore in-person opportunities, but because of COVID-19, and to be honest, because of the geopolitical situation right now in Europe, that might not make it possible. But so having some level of flexibility will be really, really important. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brittany, who can, Brittany, if you can tell us a little bit about what you did, how did you go about submitting your IEG proposal, and then I think you mentioned you had some suggestions for other funding sources.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me share my experience. So COVID obviously disrupted a lot of opportunities to travel and kind of get that, international experience that we're all kind of looking to add to our resumes and be competitive job seekers. So the intern worked really well for me because as an ADA, I don't quite get to do a semester abroad and, all that kind of stuff. So the IEG fit really well into my plans. And I went through an approved volunteer organization that I saw on the Lewis Global Center. And that's really important because I wanted to get experience, but I don't want to just make it a vacation. So, you want to see new places, but you actually want to make sure that you walk away with real world applications. So the volunteer experience was perfect for me, and it really aligned with my environmental goals, my philosophy as being like an eco-traveler. And I went through projects abroad, and I found this awesome program about working as a conservation intern at the Galapagos National Park, which was just so amazing to work with ecologists and people doing field work in conservation. And then we got to sightsee. So it was just a check mark everything on my box about living with a host family, practicing my Spanish, bringing in my environmental studies. So the most important thing that I really got out of the application process was the budget, which I highly, highly recommend you spend most of your time on, because when I went to apply for additional funding sources, a lot of places ask for a budget, and thanks to this application process with IEG, my budget was already set. So that was really perfect. And I would say overall, the application was really easy. I wrote a standard 1 page of what I want to do, where I'm going, what the position was, how my studies. So I listed some classes that I thought would really help me in what I really wanted to get out of it. And it was, I think, maybe 2 letters, maybe even 1 letter recommendation, which I just contacted my advisor. And everything just happened very seamless. So I think it was probably one of the easiest funding sources that I've sought out because I already knew the application of where I wanted to go. and just kind of why I thought I would be a good fit and why I think I should have gotten the funding. You know, like, hey, I'm looking to develop a career in conservation. I found this conservation program. Here's how I think it'll tie together with my Smith studies. Yeah, anything else I should elaborate on, Lisa? I want to make sure I don't go over time.
I think that's it right now. I think we'll circle back to you when we get to the Q&A part and stuff. And like I said, I'd like to hear about your recommendations for other funding sources. I'm going to touch on that a little bit. So after that, if you have things to add and obviously questions students might have, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you. So here's the timeline for summer. The application for the proposal for an international experience grant will be due Monday, April 11th by 11:59 p.m. Right. So I recommend when I talk to students about deadlines, I recommend not waiting until 11:59 p.m. to push that submit button. Perhaps, write it into your schedule or on your calendar, maybe even Sunday, just to give yourself a little bit of lead time if something happens, you have Monday morning to submit your application, but please don't wait until the very last minute to submit. We'll notify students of their awards by the end of April. And then you will be asked to confirm if you're going to accept your award and do your proposed activity by Monday, May 9th, right? And that's right at around the end of the semester. And then you would be going abroad. The components of an international experience grant are, as Brittany mentioned, the budget spreadsheet. And it's an Excel sheet that you just have to input your information. There's a section where we ask you to identify your expenses, and then another section that asks you to identify your resources. And then that will help you calculate approximately how much you are asking for the international experience grant. You'll have to write a personal statement about your proposal. And really, Brittany, I appreciate your description of your proposal and how you really connected it to what you're studying here at Smith, and how did you envision this off-campus opportunity to kind of help you connect the dots of what you're learning academically on campus with real life action in terms of what you're hoping to do both academically as well as personally. So strong personal statements have a really strong connection to what the students are doing academically on campus. Doesn't necessarily 100% have to be related to your major, because as we know, students have to get half of their Smith degree outside their major. So if you can also demonstrate that your proposal is related to outside the major exploration and what you've been doing with that, that's okay too. A resume, and this is just giving you, a sense of, giving the committee a sense of, what have you done thus far? Where are you at? Both in, personal and any work experience that you might have to contribute to this activity. An official transcript. So you can get a transcript from Workday, does not need to be an official one. And you'll be asked to upload a copy of your unofficial transcript there. Program information. You'll be asked about what is the program that you're participating on, if it's an actual program, or you'll be asked for more information if you're working with an organization, if you're volunteering or something like that. We'll ask you for some information. And then will need a letter of recommendation. And ideally, this letter of recommendation will support, and reference your project, and why does this person feel that, this would be a good opportunity for you. Those are the components. And the next thing is you submit all of this in Sites, which is our online application system. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and give you a view of what you would do in Sites. So can you see my cursor? Can you raise your thumb if you can see my cursor? Perfect, thank you. So ignore all of this stuff on the right. What you will see when you log into sites is everything that's in this beige thing. You'll log in and you land on the home page. And then what you want to do is in this menu bar here, click on search grants. And then here's the International Experience Grant. Here is when it's due. And you're going to select summer 2022. And here's all of the things that I just mentioned in terms of where you're going to put this information. Here is your description of your program or project. There's the section for the budget. And here you'll see the budget worksheet, which is the Excel sheet that I mentioned. Any additional information will be here, as well as your personal statement. Here is where you can request your recommendation. And as I mentioned, you only need one. You put the person's email, first name, and last name. And then when you submit, when you push the submit button, it's going to send that person an email. So I recommend that you talk to your recommender ahead of time and let them know that this request is coming. As you move through each of these sections, when you complete it, you'll get a green check mark when you've done it. And by the end, you review your application and submit. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Again, it's not that difficult. If you search on the Smith website for sites, which is the online international travel experience website, as I mentioned, you'll land here at the home page. Some of you may have study abroad applications here. Some of you who have been accepted to Global Flex Brazil, you'll see that there. Though some of you mentioned EWA, you'll see your application there on the home page. And it will be over here to search grants is where you would go to apply for the IEG. All right, now I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Can you see the how to use sites screen? Thank you. No, I can't. What's going on here? There we go. So as we mentioned, where else can you find funding on campus? The dean of the college has information, and Angela is going to put a link into our chat right now with the dean of the college and funding. And on that webpage, you will find a grid of available funding. It's important to pay attention to the information that's in that grid because one, you definitely want to apply for anything that you're eligible for, but two, you don't want to apply for things that you're not eligible for and stuff. So just make sure that you're applying and asking for money where you can. The other thing that I recommend to students as well is ask for money in as many places as you can. And the reason for that is because people can't give you money unless you ask for it, right? So submit as many applications and proposals as you need to, where you're eligible, obviously, to do that and see what you can get. Brittany, you've got something to say about that.
Yeah, I just want to add that my dean was incredibly helpful to helping me navigate this grid if you open up that PDF document, because I'm looking for specifically travel, but there was some educational expenses, and she was really a great resource to help me to figure out a little bit of what I could qualify for. She also had access to the funding that I had been receiving, so she also let me know when I kind of maxed out my opportunities. Which was really helpful though, because that means I could stop my search with Smith as the institution. I could pivot to other outside sources. So I really recommend contacting your dean and maybe even letting them, like, here's where I'm at. Here's, if you could provide any additional resource information. The dean's office is really helpful, and I don't think we utilize them all the time. So that's just my experience.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that. Another place to find funding sources is the Financial Assistance by Office webpage. And Angelo, did you put the link in there, or you're going to?
I have. No, I've dropped it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So this will tell you, by office, what sort of funding might be available to you. And it's interesting, some departments have funding for their majors to do summer activities. So you might want to take a closer look at that. And again, definitely submit your requests if it's something that you're eligible for. So the idea with summer activities in general is you're going to apply to different pots of money, including an international experience grant. And you're going to get 500 from here, maybe 500 from another place, to cobble together, as much funding as possible to help offset those costs for summer activities and stuff. So definitely, be creative and explore some of your options that you might, and be creative with it. Like I said, think outside the box. And that is the presentation in a nutshell. I'm going to stop sharing now and open it up for questions or concerns. Kiana, you have a question.
Yes, I was wondering, for the recommendations, does it have to be someone from Smith or can it be someone from outside of Smith?
I think it's best if it's someone from Smith. There's a group of people who will be reviewing applications, not just one person making decisions. And just at least in my experience, having some familiarity with the person who is actually writing the recommendation letter is more beneficial than someone who's not from Smith.
Oh, and then can they be the same person that we submitted the application or should it be someone different?
Yeah, it could be the same person. Sure. Any other questions? Isabel.
Yeah, my program is actually requesting us to send in, I guess, money on April 1st. Would IEG still be able to help out with that, even though I'm already giving away the money?
That's a good question. As we went through the timeline, you'll be notified by the end of April. So one of the recommendations I give students is see if there's a way you can get an extension on your confirmation deadline, and explain to them, that you're waiting to hear back from funding, and that we've just told you expect to hear back by the end of April, and see if they'd be willing to give you an extension. Definitely do everything else on your part to confirm, but just leave that the money part not confirmed, and see if we can get an extension.
Miriam asks in the chat, is this a resource you can use multiple times? For example, if I need help studying abroad again in the future?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely students are eligible to receive international experience grants twice during their time at Smith, and stuff. We have a limited amount of funding, and we try to fund as many people as we can, and stuff. But yeah, you can apply for an international experience grant twice. While you're thinking of a couple more questions, I want to just take a quick moment and introduce Greg White, who's our faculty leader here in the Global Studies Center. I know, Greg, you want to say hey?
Yeah, and I was on from the beginning. I was listening on my iPhone en route from Florence, so I heard the introductions, and it's good to have everybody here. And thank you to Lisa and Angelo and Brittany too for the presentations and the information. So it's I'm glad there's such interest, and any way we can help, please let us know.
Great. Brittany, I'm going to circle back to you. Like I said, do you have other funding ideas for students?
Sure, I made a list because I was pretty aggressive in my funding. So just kind of reiterate what you said, you don't know until you ask. So I also went through the Student Smith Aid Society because they do cover travel. So they gave me $1,000, which was really nice. And then I created an email campaign. So anybody that had ever sent me an email, they got a letter an email, which I spent a lot of time composing. So don't do it hastily. Really think about it. And I kind of put, I want to thank you all for your support over the years. I've been a student. Here's some big things I'm working on, and just kind of went into like, here's what I want to do. Here's what I hope to get out of it. And I was like, for less than a Starbucks coffee, you can contribute to my GoFundMe. And I was really moved by how many people, because it feels awkward to ask, right? You're like, this feels weird. But I was really moved about how many people had gave me money. And I had community college professors from like 3 years ago donated. And, you just never know the impact you had on people and how they're just willing to support you. So I did a GoFundMe, and, like I said, I did a big email campaign. I also posted something on LinkedIn. Again, spend time with these materials because you want to make sure you come across as professional and, that's what you're really doing. And I had a lot of people share that. And again, that kind of trickled back down to my GoFundMe. So those were, and then I did a bake sale. It would just happen to be around Christmas time, and like, what am I good at? And what can I do quickly with my time? And I was like, hey, I'm pretty good baker. So I just created a Google form like, hey, anybody want some cookies and cakes for your holiday party? And I made about $300. Most people are a little bit more generous. So they're like, they knew what I was doing. So they spent like $50 on a plate of cookies, like, hey, here you go. And so those are some different tactics that I came up with, and it worked. So my budget was $5,800, and I had about $4,500 covered. And then I contributed from the rest from my savings. So, if you think creative and be aggressive, you can, really, get yourself in a good position.
Thanks, Brittany. Those are great examples.
Yeah, wonderful tips. That you touch on. I like to think of funding sometimes as like this bubble, right? That you can shrink and expand as you need. And the IEG is at the local sort of Smith institutional level. But what you've been talking about, Brittany, is like expanding to your own network. The email campaign that's great, super creative.
And also just to point out, we responded to Paris's good question. So I guess it was about the time frame, the length of the program.
Yeah.
And Dean Johnson responded about 6 to 8 weeks for summer programs.
Yeah, I'm going to actually put in our chat too now the link to the international and the information about international experience grants on our website. It has the, in case you want to refer back to it, it has funding criteria, components, all of the stuff that we're talking about today. You can also refer back to our website. And of course, reach out to the Global Study Center or the Study Abroad office with any questions. That's what we're here for. Definitely.
And I would also just circle back to emphasize one point that's been made about the availability of funds in various departments and programs, and something to investigate. So in the government department, for example, with which I'm really familiar, we have summer funding support. So that can be another source of funds. It's the Fox Borstein Fund, and it's expressly for international opportunities or internships that pertain to international matters. But so you could apply for that as well. And it's not limited only to Gov students. I can say as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a nice, interesting tidbit.
So I mean, if it's a exactly, if it's a if you're sociology or econ or whatever, another history, whatever major you may be, if your internship pertains to international matters, in some kind of fundamental way, you can apply for the funding support for sure.
Another good example of that at the departmental level, non-majors in music, this is sort of broadly defined, I guess, but if you're known by the department, they have something called the Rose Prize, which could be a good fit, particularly for those thinking about like the Brazil Global Flex program. The AWA exchange program has some music courses in the summer if you want to enroll in those. So lots of ask good questions, and you may find some good answers, as Lisa mentioned, and Brittany too.
I'd also recommend just asking your advisors that again, that kind of goes back to what Professor White has said about departments sometimes get extra funding, and sometimes not everybody applies, and some things are just kind of weird year to year, especially the last couple of years. So you just never know if there's like a surplus of funding. So I would ask your advisors, like, hey, these are my plans. You know about any departments that, you don't have to be a gov major, or have to be this, and they might be able to, give you some direction, maybe some other people to talk to, or maybe even some seniors that had really successful funding. Be like, oh, you should talk to Brittany. I know she did this thing, and she it was really easy. So again, kind of that networking skill we can all develop a little bit more.
Right. I want to add on to what Brittany was saying too, the comment, especially the last couple of years. I do want to let people know that there is a risk assessment group that meets regularly, and we will be assessing the risk, travel risk, primarily related to COVID, to all of your study abroad destinations. And if you were to look at the State Department right now and see the travel advisories, 75% of the world is in travel 4. Fortunately, Smith is not using just the U.S. State Department travel advisories to make determinations around travel, international travel, or study abroad. And so we have another set of metrics that we're looking at, and we will make decisions accordingly. Also, fortunately, at least with COVID, for right now, things seem to be improving, right? And they're going in the right direction. So that is definitely provides some hope as well, but also know, the college has your back. We're doing the risk assessment, and we will not knowingly let you go into a high risk situation and stuff like that. If you have questions or concerns about where you're going, please, again, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to talk to you about that. Any of us here in the Global Study Center are happy to address those concerns if you have them. All right. I think I'm going to stop recording.